Alright, in this tutorial I'm going to go over not only how to create a basic cartoon shader for an object, but also how to take that and use it in a dynamic way throughout your scene so you can still control the coloring and the style of your overall piece after you've applied it to the entire scene. Now this is just going to go over the coloring and texturing part of a stylized look. If you're interested in other types of stylized look, I highly recommend this video by Gleb Alexandrov. That'll go over the different ways to get style. Before I get too much further though, I would like to give a huge thank you to Curtis Holt and everybody else who's joined from his channel. It really means a lot to me that you guys subscribed, so thank you, seriously. And without further ado, let's get right into the video. For this example scene, I'm going to add in a Suzanne model, hit Ctrl+3 to apply 3 subdivisions, right-click Shade Smooth, go to Rendered View in Eevee and add your lighting, as you'll be basing your texturing values on your scene lighting. Go to Shader Editor, New Material, add a color ramp, add Shader to RGB, and if you don't see the option for Shader to RGB, it's because you're in Cycles, so make sure to switch back to Eevee so you can use this. If you have the Node Wrangler add-on activated, easily connect the principal shader to the converter by holding Alt right-click and dragging between the two nodes. To avoid automatically connecting the alpha socket to the color ramp node, hit Alt-Shift right-click, which will bring up a menu in which you can select which nodes you'd like to connect. Then connect the color ramp to your output, and you can now use the color ramp to change the values of the shadows and the highlights. Now that you have a very simple stylized look for your object, we can take this and apply it universally to the entire scene. To do this, we're going to create a node group by selecting all of the nodes except for the output node and hitting Ctrl-G. Then Tab to go inside of the group. The benefit of having a group node is you get to choose which values you see on the outside of the node, so it really simplifies things. To do this, you're going to click and drag from the input inside the group to any value within there. Then it will automatically appear on the outside. For our look, first go to the color ramp and add a couple different colors that you want to be the theme for your overall piece. But don't worry, because of this node group workflow, once we have it set up, you can change these colors at any point and it will propagate throughout the entire scene. Move the values of the color ramp until you get the desired ratio of colors and harshness that you want. Ease and constant are two very good basic transitions to use for different stylized looks. If you want, add a noise texture, change the scale, and multiply that with the original shader colors before it reaches the color ramp. This will give you a more patchy transition, which you can stylize even more by selecting how you want the noise to be multiplied in. Using color burn here, it also gives you a pretty neat effect. Now to create the actual universal shader, all you're going to do is go to every object in your scene and copy paste the node group into it. Or alternatively, you can hit Shift-A group and select your node group to add in. If you already have textures set up, look at what inputs from those textures you're going to need in your node group. Likely you'll need a color, metallic, roughness, bump, and bump strength nodes within your node group. Remember, all of the input values that you create on this node group will be the ones that you can change per object that it's on. Everything that's within the node group itself will stay the same for every single object that the node group is applied to. If you already spent a lot of time texturing everything, you can also create an input for the node group that goes directly into the shader, so you only have to plug in the shader that you've already used. Now to clean up and organize the sockets, go to the node side panel and select your inputs. Here you can rename, reorder, and determine any minimum or maximum values that you want for the inputs. To rename the entire node group, tab outside, go to the item side panel, and it's not going to be the name or label that actually allows you to change the names, but rather underneath properties in which you can change the visible name of your node group. Now with this setup, you'll notice that the color only changes the brightness and darkness of the object. We want to be able to control this, but right now it's set as an RGB. So instead, let's change this to be a factor slider, as that's a lot easier to manipulate. Inside the node group, add a mix node, create a new input connecting it to the factor node. This will give you the factor slider. You can now take this noodle and connect it to the color. Now rename the factor brightness, and now you have a slider that's purely just for the brightness of your object. Now if you're not going for a universal color palette for your entire scene and you want to actually add differentiation between the two objects, we need to create a way to tint each object so you still have some of the base color grading that's already being done, but there's enough of a difference between the materials of the objects. Select your color ramp and hit Ctrl+ to add a mix shader node after it. Attach a new input to the second color and the factor. Now go select a random color to test this out with. Mixing with color dodge gives you a nice subtle transition. I've found that multiply is the best in most of my cases. Now you have this basic setup, feel free to manipulate it however you want to create whatever stylized look. You can also combine different things from different tutorials that I've linked down below, which can give you a really nice, unique stylized look for your entire scene. Just make sure to not overload the number of inputs you have on your node group, because remember, a goal of this is to also simplify this entire process. Now you can also add this node group into the world world so you can create a completely uniform look for your entire scene. If you ever decide you want to change something within the node group but don't want it to affect any of the other objects, hit this little button which will create an unconnected copy just as it would if you were creating a material. If you still want to use HDRI lighting and reflections in your scene, but you don't want to mess up the color scheme you have going, go to the world shader editor, add a light path, mix node, and use the isCameraRay value as the factor between your HDRI and your stylized node group. For most of my uses though, the HDRI eliminates too many of the shadows and doesn't give me quite the stylized look I want, but it can be nice to have that if you have a reflective object in your scene. And that is my basic workflow for creating a stylized render in Blender. This is, again, purely focusing on the color. There's so many other ways to play around with the style, but I hope this was helpful in some way. Thank you again to everybody who subscribed from Curtis Holt's video. Please let me know down in the comments if there's any specific type of content you'd like to see. Please do all the classic YouTube stuff, like, comment, subscribe, share, all that good jazz. You know what it is. You know the classic YouTube outro thing. But yeah, thank you again, and I will see you in the next one.